Good morning and a very warm welcome to day 3 of Energy Security and Green Infrastructure Week, the UK's biggest green infrastructure conference for the energy economy. My name is Andy Walker and I'm a construction and infrastructure journalist. Many thanks to our sponsors for the week this week, Cundall, Epicam and Vattenfall Heat UK for their support for the event. Today we're going to be focusing on a very important issue in this whole area. And it's an issue that's already come up in both of our first 2 days during the course of this event. And that's the issue of skills and diversity, because we can talk at length about what needs to be done in relation to achieving net zero and a more sustainable world. But if we don't have the skills and the people to actually affect that, and in many ways affect change, then we're obviously going to be severely hampered. So we're going to be delving a bit deeper into the whole skills issue during the course of this morning's sessions. And we do have sessions on equality, diversity and inclusion, skills for the energy economy, and later we've got a session on skills development in the nuclear power sector. A reminder that during all of these discussion sessions, the audience has the opportunity to ask questions or make brief points using the questions box that you will see in front of you on the screen, denoted by like a square speech bubble and a question mark in it, and it'll be located somewhere on your screen depending on the you know, whether it's a laptop or a phone, whatever you're accessing on it may well be in a different place. So please make use of that. Yesterday we had tons of questions, too many in fact, but you know, we'll make sure that we get to them all one way or the other, including via our social media output as well. Anyway, let's get started with this first session of the day, which is focusing on ED&I, champion equality, diversity and inclusion in the energy sector. And we're going to be discussing here, how do we foster a more inclusive energy sector? And we're also going to be learning a little bit about how diversity can actually help us get to more groundbreaking solutions for a sustainable future, and also realize some real business benefits. Yes, it's important that the sector is diverse, and we need to ensure that we're inclusive, but at the same time, that will and can, as I'm sure our speakers will illustrate shortly, have real definable business benefits as well. And those speakers are this morning, our panelists, Dr. Emma Wilcox, Chief Executive of the Society for the Environment. She's going to be talking, amongst other things, the importance of diverse teams in delivering effective solutions, reflect on some of the progress that's actually been made, and also some of the ongoing challenges that maybe prevent the sector from fully reflecting the communities that it serves. After Emma's spoken, we've got Charlotte Morton, OBE, Chief Executive of the World Biogas Association, who's going to talk about some of her association's work around gender parity. And also, she's going to be looking again at some of the challenges faced in this area, but also make the central point, I think, although she'll make it for herself, that diversity and inclusion are essential drivers of innovation, performance and progress across the entire sector. Anyway, that's enough from me. Without further ado, I'm going to bring in now our first panelist, and that is Dr. Emma Wilcox, Chief Executive of the Society for the Environment. Emma, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Andy. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well. So I was just going to take a minute or so just to highlight why I think diversity in the workplace is important. And first of all, when I talk about diversity, I'm actually talking about it in its broadest sense. So everything from kind of gender and sex and ethnicity and disability, but right through to diversity of thought as well. It's kind of very clear that if we all think the same way, we're going to get a certain solution. If we've got people who think in different ways, that's going to help us to be more creative. So why do I think that diversity is really important? Well, first of all, quite clearly, the more diverse a pool we're able to attract, the wider talent pool we have, and good people experienced people, people with a real passion for our industries are often quite hard to recruit. So having as bigger access to a wider talent pool as possible is a really beneficial thing to have. It also gives us a really positive workplace reputation. And I'm not talking about, in my world, I would talk about kind of greenwashing for things, but I'm not talking about just paying lip service. Actually, a really positive workplace reputation that comes from our employees will attract other staff to us and will attract customers to us as well. There's lots of data that demonstrates a more diverse workplace gives us a reduced employee turnover, so we're able to hang on and retain our teams. And also within the workplace as well, there's lots of data that shows an increased creativity and problem solving, and we're going to hear about that a little bit later on. Increased profits, again, lots of data that I don't have time to go into now. And overall, an increased employee engagement. Employees like to be part of diverse teams. They recognise the benefits of that. So again, just really big benefits to you as a business from having a diverse team. And that's why I think it is really important. So Andy, I'm happy to stop there and hand over and then back to questions.
Thanks very much, Emma, for that introduction. And I think you're absolutely right. We will drill down into quite a bit of detail on some of those issues, and hopefully as well give some practical examples and maybe examples of best practice that people can follow going forward as well. Our next speaker, as I said, is Charlotte Morton, OBE, Chief Executive of the World Biogas Association. So let's hear from Charlotte now. Charlotte, over to you. I think is about to. She is. Charlotte.
Yeah. Well, good morning, and delighted to be with everybody this morning, talking about this super important topic. And I couldn't agree more with the benefits that have just been highlighted. But let me just start by highlighting what I think is the number one crucial point, which is that we are now in a world where we are facing challenges that we have never faced before. And I'd say even in a war environment where everybody has demonstrated that they've come together, and women were involved in doing all sorts of things that they would otherwise not have done in the past. We're now facing a world where we have to respond against a terrifyingly short timeline. And that means, as we've already highlighted, that every single business and all of us have to perform as successfully and well as we possibly can. We absolutely need to outperform. And as has already been said, all the evidence shows that a diverse workforce is the best way to ensure that a business can perform to its very best. We have extraordinary solutions we need to come up with to address these horrendous challenges, and particularly in the world that I live in, which is a circular economy world. We need collaboration across sectors in a way that simply has never happened before. And so diversity of thought, diversity of approach to solutions is going to be absolutely essential if we're going to stand any chance at all of addressing those challenges. Just a few of the things that we're doing to try to ensure that we can improve the diversity across the biogas industry. We're carrying out an annual survey to look at how our member companies and other companies across the sector are addressing diversity, so that we can see, well, even asking the question makes people think about it, but two, looking at how diversity is improving across our sector. And I'm pleased to see that actually year on year it is improving. We have a Women in Biogas working group that is looking at how collectively we can improve how companies are supporting diversity in their business and what we can offer. So that is work in progress in itself, but it is absolutely vital, just to conclude at this point, that every company looks at how diverse it is and what it can do to improve the diversity of its workforce, with the understanding that the most diverse workforce will ensure a business performs to its very best, and that means diversity, of course, at every level, particularly in the leadership teams, which is where the issue is more acute. So I'll stop there at that point.
Thanks very much, Charlotte, for that. And again, you've raised a couple of things there that I do want to explore in a bit more detail in a second. And I'm sure Emma will be joining us on camera any minute, because I've got a couple of questions for her to kick things off in a second. But as I said in my introduction, this is an issue that came up on a number of occasions during the first 2 days of this week. Sometimes in a critical sense as well, where many of our attendees were saying that the sector just isn't diverse enough across the piece. Some were talking about gender diversity, but there was also ethnicity in there as well. And my background means that I always like to talk about people's social backgrounds as well, because I don't think that we properly reflect that. And I don't think it's just in the net zero sector either. I write a lot about engineering, about construction, and certain sections of those industries are not as diverse as they need to be. Yes, the situation is improving, but I think, we would all probably agree that it needs to improve more quickly. And I think the points that Charlotte's made around the importance and the urgency of the challenge around net zero is such that unless we get those diverse voices around the table, we're actually going to be potentially in a bit of trouble. Which is a bit of a long way of introducing my first question to Charlotte, which is, why is the industry facing diversity challenges in your view?
I think it stems from, that's a bit of an unintended pun, but it does stem from the lack of gender diversity from the education in the first place. Why is it we're having fewer women doing courses that are relevant to the sector in the first place? So I think it's really important that those courses attract a diverse range of students, and so employers have access to a diverse talent pool coming out of colleges and universities with the right skill set to ensure that they can start with a recruitment of a diverse employee base in the first place. I think I need another coffee. Sorry.
Okay, the same question to you, Emma. What, in your view, why do you think we have this? Let's call it a challenge, not a problem.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think this, use the STEM word again, goes back a really long way. So if I think back to my kind of parents' generation, certainly on a kind of gender perspective. So my dad went to Chatham Dockyards to do an apprenticeship. My mum worked in a shop. And that was just the kind of reality. And of course, we've made huge strides and changes since then. But people need kind of role models, and they need to understand the opportunities. And I think in some areas we've got really good at that, and others we haven't. So there's still this perception, although less than it was before, that engineering, should we say, and construction is very much a kind of a male job, and some of these others are not. And we can put that across lots of different diversity characteristics. So I think it's a really long standing issue. There's been some fantastic work done. The STEMnet program, I think, has done fantastic work. around attracting people into different careers. Employers themselves are doing fantastic work, and if we look at how some of that data has shifted and is shifting, and we look at the kind of the advances in technology and how all those jobs have changed as well, that balance is shifting. Of course, we've still got work to do, but I think this is just a very long-standing issue where we're dealing with some of those kind of cultural narratives that still exist today.
Just picking
Could
up
I
Emma on
just,
the yeah, go on, Charlotte. Come in.
sorry, I didn't want a button, but I couldn't agree more that there's
Right.
this issue of perception is so important. Several years ago, I participated in some workshops trying to look at trying to understand why women were not entering clean tech, which is sort of have a very similar sector, and I was really surprised that actually the biggest reason that was given, or that everybody aligned around, was not so much what employers were doing, it was the perception that children were given about roles that were suitable for them, and the confidence that women had, which was given to them primarily from their parents and the teachers they had at school, about what courses and what roles were appropriate for them. And that difference in attitude that their parents gave them was the reason that some women were able to felt that there were no barriers, but other women felt that there were barriers to them progressing in those sectors. So I know from my own background that both my parents were my mother wore the trousers, and both my parents were completely supportive of anything I wanted to do, but there were other people in the workshops where that wasn't the case. So I do think there's a lot that can be done from a very early point in ensuring that people's perception of what's open to them is open.
Thanks. It's interesting talking about perceptions because again, this came up yesterday and the day before in the broader context of public awareness around the issue, around the issues involved with green infrastructure, even as basic as the issues around net zero and the importance of them. Do you think that our sector does enough of a, I suppose, a comms job on not just raising the importance of the issues, but also raising the importance of this is a sector where you can make a real difference to society going forward, particularly around some of these issues around net zero, sustainability, climate change. Do we do enough there in order to attract the people that we need to attract going forward? And I'll put that question first of all to Emma, and then I'll come back to you, Charlotte. Emma.
Yeah, no, I think is the short answer. So we did some research earlier this year around young people and green jobs, and the statistics were really stark. So it was I'll give you the kind of rough numbers, but I'm happy to share the data if anyone would like to see it. Kind of around 3/4 of young people say they'd be really interested in a green job, and then when you say to them, "What's a green job?" they say, "I don't know," and there's a real stark mismatch between people wanting to be part of a solution and actually knowing what that means. What does that actually mean in terms of a job? And then when you say to people, "Oh, that is around maybe electrification, or it could even be kind of trench digging or welding or things," "Oh, no, that's not for me." So I think we do need to do a much better job in, first of all, helping people see that they can be part of a solution, which for many people, and there's a lot of climate anxiety around, can be really empowering as well, to actually think I can help and support this through my work and my career. Is a very empowering thing to do. But actually to help people understand what those jobs are, what does that actually mean, rather than just saying a green job. I think we've got lots more to do on that.
Charlotte, your views on that?
I couldn't completely agree. Some of the things that we've tried to do is to do sort of case studies with little videos of women in our sector, where they talk about what their roles are today, what that involves, what their pathway to getting into those roles was, and to try to help people visualize how they might enjoy that role and what they've got to do to get into it, and trying to make that as interesting and accessible as possible. I think I now want to go and look at our website, but we did have a whole page where we'd got a lot of women doing those little videos and talking about their job, so that to help people understand what the day-to-day role involved, so that they could feel that, okay, that could be something I want to do.
Okay, thanks. It's interesting. We often come back to how we need this shift in perception, in perspectives from everyone involved, really, employees, education, and companies. And there's a question that we've been sent by Christy Bergman, one of our attendees, and she said, "But how do we actually go about creating long-lasting change?" And I suppose that's a $6 million question, really. How would you propose we actually create this mindset shift? Because I suppose it isn't just one section of the industry or one key kind of opinion former that would be involved in that. But do either of you have any, sort of bright ideas on how we actually go, around that? Is there something more that government could be done, perhaps? Emma, what's your view on that?
Great question. So I'm going to put out three things. So first of all, I'm a great believer in kind of data and baselines and actually understanding what the issue is rather than what we think the issue is. So again, I'm happy to share the link. So Energy and Utility Skills do a fantastic piece of work on an inclusion measurement framework, and that covers energy and the kind of wider utilities, where they look at all different diversity characteristics and they monitor that year on year by employers feeding in their data. So I think it's really important to understand what the challenge is, first of all, so you're addressing the right things. From kind of my perspective, we talked about case studies. I think role models are so fantastic, and actually helping people understand. Actually, I can see that I can understand that is something for me, and doing that as early as possible. There again, there's lots of stats around people doing the diversity of people doing those STEM A levels is really quite good, or much better than it was. You think the maths is the second highest A level that's taken. But then when you then move to university, that's when you start to see those drop-offs. So again, how are we working with schools to show people that these opportunities are available to them? And then the third thing I think we really need to do is think about the barriers that we create unintentionally. So for my organisation, we run professional standards, and we in terms of our diversity work, we wanted to take a step back and we looked at our standards to see what unintended barriers we'd put in place for people that we didn't mean to, but for some people it just made it unachievable. And I just get one example was that we require people to have an interview. Now, if you are you've got some neurodiversity, being told you have to have an interview is actually potentially quite a barrier for people. So we've really started to think about what are we doing that is unintentionally stopping people doing the things that we would wish for them to do. So yeah, so I think there's a get the data, focus on the areas that really matter, role models and early, and then really look at any unintended barriers that we're putting in, either as an organisation or as an industry as well.
Thanks, Emma. Charlotte, what's your view on how we practically create that, mindset shift, really? Because it's not just we want people to do something differently. We actually want them to think differently as well, probably, in order to do differently.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very difficult question, and Emma's right that you first have to understand the problem, why we need to have this shift in the first place, because you're not going to then create that permanent shift if we don't. I still think there's an issue of lack of appreciation that diversity really does improve performance. So if we can, as part of the data collection exercise, we can continue to demonstrate or try the link between diverse teams and company performance or team performance. I think that will be really important, just to keep getting that message home to those people who can influence diversity, that it really does matter. And you asked a question earlier as well about what government can do. I always think that government has an incredibly important role in the ability to educate and inform in the most cost-effective way. I think, we've talked about the work that we've done in sort of showcasing people within the industry to show role models. But I think that there's a lot more that government can do, and in a very cost efficient way, because for every company doing this, it's a lot of cost. If there's some sort of centralized place where best practice can be developed and shared, role models can be talked about, the government can share information and data as well to show that performance is improved, and generally make information and tools available to companies. I think that's the most cost-effective way of doing it. And of course, there's a link between that and what courses and the approach that schools and universities are taking. So there's the ability to sort of join things up at a government level that is perhaps harder to do for organisations like ours and individual companies.
Thanks, Charlotte. The whole joining up piece, again, is something that we've been discussing in a variety of contexts over the last couple of days. Just turning to you, Emma, obviously we've got these challenges, but can you give some examples of where we're seeing an improvement, and maybe how is that being then communicated to, I suppose, encourage others?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I touched on the improvements in A levels. I think that's a really important one to highlight. Of course, other kind of routes are available. I think generally employers are doing very much better. And so if you, I've put the link in the chat, Andy. So if people want to share that, you can go and look at it, and you can actually see as the energy and utility profession that changes are being made. And I went to look at one of the again shows my perception. So I went to look at some of the data before we came on this morning, and I looked at I'll talk about women versus men because that's the kind of the thing we've been talking about. And for leadership, for the energy and utility sector, it was 35% women to 65% men. And I thought, well, I thought about glass ceilings, and I thought about that's going to be kind of different. That's not going to be. That's going to be a closer split when I get to the kind of the wider industry. And then I went to look at the wider industry, and actually the percentage of women was about 30%, so it's actually lower. So it shows that actually we're doing much better in those kind of leadership positions, where we would have traditionally talked much more about glass ceilings and women's on boards and all of those kind of things. And I was really heartened to see that, and kind of bad me for my perception that it was going to be the other way around as well. So I think there are examples like that where we are doing very much better. And I think generally as broadly more employers are much more aware of people with different kind of learning abilities and neurodiversity as well, and workplaces are becoming much more inclusive. And actually technology like this and the working from home, I think, has been a real enabler as well for including people with disabilities into workplaces. So there are good things that we are doing. Of course, we've got a lot more to do, but the fact that we're talking about this, I think, again, is a really good sign as well.
Thanks, Emma. It's interesting you mentioned platforms like this, because I think, I mean, I do kind of a lot of meetings, webinars, and all the rest of it, and it is a completely different. I'm going to say it because it's in my head. It's a completely different vibe when you have a more diverse panel. It just is. And when if something as simple as just an online meeting can be different, imagine how different it can be when it's a meeting of minds in an organization. You just cannot fail to get a more diverse approach to problems. Now, some of those problems, solutions could be off the wall, but who cares? At the end of the day, sometimes you need to have a bit of creative conflict in order to get to a solution that's actually going to work. But I think things like, having more diverse, whether it be panels on events like this, or the whole leadership question, which I think is really important. That obviously takes work, and leadership is important in that. I don't know whether you, Charlotte, have got any views on how do we get that point across to the industry's leaders who in a lot of cases, not exclusively, but in a lot of cases, are not as diverse in terms of their makeup as they ought to be. How can we get that across? I mean, I hear what both of you are saying, and it's absolutely right about diversity is crucial from a business imperative, but how do we practically explain why that is?
Well, there's two questions there really. One is getting people to even think about it and realize that it's important. The second thing is getting them to understand or think about why it is. People aren't even going to listen to the second one unless they think that the business is going to perform better with a diverse workforce. So I think it is absolutely imperative to keep making the case that financial or business performance is significantly enhanced through a diverse workforce. And how do you get that message across to, say, business leaders who don't believe it, don't think about it? Who are they going to listen to? So, what I actually am quite impressed, or was quite impressed by somebody I met a few years ago who was very high up in a very large company, a man, and it was his job to talk about diversity and promote diversity with his business, and he was phenomenally good at it. And so in some ways it's good having somebody who is potentially is not from the people we're trying to attract up into from the diverse group, if you like. I'm not expressing that very well again, but we're talking about trying to attract more women and diverse groups into the workforce. So having a white male perhaps is making that case is potentially more likely to be listened to. I don't know, but he did make the case very well and walked the talk the whole time. So, but how do you do that? How do you get, say, a board of purely a purely male board that really none of whom get the point about diversity? I think that's where there's it's a real challenge. So I think that's a pretty difficult one, but there can be role models within a business who can make the case and try to demonstrate the improvement in performance from a diverse group. So I think anybody within a business can have some kind of influence, but I still think it is always going to come back, or will often come back, to data and proving the point with case studies.
I'm going to come back to the data issue in a minute, but just before I do, I just want to ask Emma about this whole leadership issue as well, because it seems to me that ED&I is a boardroom issue really that needs a bit of a microscope put on it. I don't see how any organization in the modern world can actually ignore that. So, and I know that many organizations are, taking it very, very seriously. But how do we shift that up the agenda, in your view, and make it so that it can't be ignored? It should be seen, not just as a KPI, which it should be anyway, but also it should be seen as very much part of the health of an organisation.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So if we look to let's look to my world, let's look to environment and kind of net zero and sustainability policies. So that has become a boardroom issue for, I guess, kind of three reasons. One, around climate. If you're a large organisation, there's government targets, things that you have to do. So it's written into law. So that kind of tends to focus a board's mind. The second is a drive from customers, people wanting to see and will proactively buy from organisations who they feel are doing the right thing. So definitely a customer drive in there as well. And the other is investment and finance. So if you want to get a loan from the bank, or you want investment, then you need to demonstrate that you have a really good sustainability policy, and not just something that's a glossy brochure, actually something where some action's being taken broadly. And I think we just have to apply the same things. If customers are driving for it, if investment or finance is linked to it, and there's some kind of legal requirement, then change will happen. And don't get me wrong, I do think change has happened. I think there are some really great examples of what organisations have done and are doing. And I think there's a lot of progress. So when I went to university in the early 90s, and I did a work placement at Kings North Power Station during one of the kind of shutdowns of the boilers, and there was me and about 150 men on that site, and I was seen as really weird and unusual. That's probably a fair comment, but actually nowadays it certainly wouldn't be just me, and it would be a much more diverse community working on projects like that. So I do think we've made improvements, but yeah, definitely the kind of legal, the customer and finance, I think, are big drivers for any kind of change.
Thanks, Emma. Just coming back to the data issue, and I know, Charlotte, we were speaking before we came on air around, obviously there's a lot of data in this area, but it's about how you interpret it, and it can be misinterpreted. How best do we use data, and how do we avoid any potential pitfalls in its use when trying to highlight this issue of diversity?
Well, yeah, I'm glad I saw you post. I don't know if the audience can see it, but you posted a link to Invisible Women, which is a fantastic, eye-opening book that absolutely highlights that we are so often collecting data as if men and women are the same, and they are so often, in most cases, not the same, to the point that it's having unbelievable impacts on wrong decision making. Including, there's some amazing examples in there from the health sector showing that because women's data is aggregated into male data, the conclusions about the type of treatment that women should have are actually killing them, because they're saying that they're sort of reaching the conclusion that the same kind of treatment that are appropriate to solve one issue for men is the same for women, but actually it's completely not. So we are killing women by collecting data as if they are the same as men. So the biggest conclusion from that book is we must collect data about men and about women and other groups, obviously, separately, because it is the only way that you will properly understand what the issues are and what the appropriate solutions are. And inevitably, in so many cases, the solutions for women and other diverse groups will be different from men.
Thanks, Charlotte. I think one of the things that the both of you have touched on is this idea and this concept of basically promoting diversity by people who are in themselves diverse in our organisations. And there's a question being put through from Victoria Ferguson, which I never really thought about it this way, but perhaps I should have done. But maybe it's because I'm a man. And I mean that in all seriousness, because we are different. And as I said earlier, it's a different type of conversation when you have these conversations with people of a different gender, of people of a different ethnicity. And I think the more we can have that melting pot, the better, to be honest. We need to find ways of doing it. But what Victoria's saying is that, yes, we need to be getting more diverse, getting people out speaking to schools and colleges and other, kind of forums. But she says that could mean that colleagues from diverse backgrounds will be asked to take on a lot more of that activity. How can we make that more manageable for them in the workplace? Should it not be part of our roles so that workload is managed accordingly, i.e. employees who get involved in EDI activities like that don't feel that, they go away, they do these things, and then they come back and they've got like a million emails or loads of work to be done. I mean, are we thinking in that way, in your opinion? I don't know whether, Emma, you've got a view on that. Are we making it easier for the advocates that we do need to get out there to do that advocacy?
I think it depends on the employer. I think there are some examples where absolutely employers recognise that, and are making it part of people's roles and creating wholly complete roles around these kind of activities as well. So I think there are examples of that. I think there are other examples where it's just as described. It's you do it as a voluntary basis on top of the day job, and has ever been thus so. I guess so. I think it's very mixed and very balanced. Often comes down to the employer, and there is a bit of a balance. I mean, particularly small businesses, I think, very much struggle with resource coming off of the day job. So I think there are examples both ways, and I do think it's a bit of a give and take on things like that.
Charlotte, do you have a view on that?
Well, I think it's in an ideal world, obviously more time would be dedicated to specifically in someone's job role so that they have the time to focus on it and take steps accordingly. So clearly that would be a good thing to do. But I agree that where it's happening, it's an add-on in so many cases, and the work that people are doing to either be a mentor to other people or support and trying to make improvements in diversity is something that they are doing, going above and beyond their roles to do it. And I mean, it's obviously, I'm thinking of our business. We have our HR, our head of people and culture, and it's part of her remit specifically to do that. But for anybody else across the business, it's much more on a voluntary basis. There's a wonderful group of women in biogas in Brazil, and I know that all of those wonderful women, and it's a phenomenally enormous group that is supporting each other in an amazing way. But all of the work that they're doing is definitely above and beyond their day job and their family life. So it's extraordinary what they're managing to achieve. But it's definitely not, in most of the cases, part of their job remit, which it really should be.
Okay, I mean, I think it should definitely be part of the remit, notwithstanding the fact that, it's maybe difficult to have these, sometimes challenging conversations about, well, yeah, there's a day job to be done as well. If you're actually doing this because you want to improve your firm, then it actually should be part of what's done. I want to go back to Emma and ask whether she's aware of, are there any lessons here for this sector from other industries? Because you look at other industries, other professions that seem, at least on the face of it, to be getting it, more right than what we are, or in a better place. Are you aware of any lessons that we can learn from other sectors?
Not. I mean, off the top of my head, I think there's professions that have been doing a lot of work, but as I said, it comes back to the specifics. So we could look at the NHS, which has a very diverse workforce, but it's a very different type of role. And then if we talk back to those kind of perceptions around kind of caring type profession, we would just enter a different place. I've just kind of shared with you, Andy, something called STEM ambassadors, and STEM, from the last question and from this one as well. So STEM ambassadors work with a whole range of people who then go into schools and businesses and really raise the profile of STEM related jobs. So people are often doing it in their own time, and sometimes employers give them the time as volunteers to do that as well. But the individuals, the ambassadors, get a huge amount out of that as well, personally, because they're part of a network. They are doing something and talking about something they're very passionate about. And there's lots of examples in there of what individual businesses and industries have been doing as well. So I'd certainly point people to have a look at STEM ambassadors. And if you are interested in this kind of activity to encourage people in there, you can't go far wrong as signing up with the STEM ambassador network.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll share that in the chat in a minute as well. The other, it's not an elephant in the room, but I don't think you can ignore them, and that is government. I mean, they always come up in conversations like this. Indeed, throughout our deliberations during this week, they've come up. And there's a question that I've got is how does the industry best lobby government on this issue? And I'm just going to expand that out and ask you both as well. What more can the government do? What signals can the government send to improve ED&I more generally in these important sectors that are so crucial, frankly, to the future of the country and the future of the planet? So, Charlotte, if you can try and address what is, I appreciate, a complicated and involved issue, especially given the fact that you don't have the reins of government in your hands.
Well, yeah, that's a very, very good question, and actually quite a challenging one. I'm trying to think about KPIs, data collection. Clearly, if you start monitoring something, you start watching it, and if you set KPIs, you start watching it. So if government were to think it, if we were to lobby government to say we would like you to collect data on these things, and I think there is actually quite a lot of data collected, at least every time I'm answering a question from my, I don't know, about council tax or something, they're always asking me actually quite a rather large number of questions. But if government could lead on data collection and reporting on it in a positive way, that could be a very helpful thing for them to do. Lobbying government is always somewhat challenging, so we lobby government for all sorts of things, and perhaps we should cross-sectorally agree. I'm really not communicating well this morning. There are lots of organisations. So if, say, Emma's organisation and my organisation, and we looked at various other organisations within our sector or related sector, were to agree on what we wanted government to do, then we should go into government with that message coming from lots of voices. So that's one of the most effective ways to lobby government, is for a variety of stakeholders to agree on the ask, and then all of us go and ask government for that ask. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, Emma, finally, your view on that in terms of the role of government in all of this.
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. I'm a huge fan of apprenticeships. You talked about social diversity, Andy. I think they're a real benefit, and people with disabilities as well. But what we've seen increasingly over recent years with the change in apprenticeship funding is a lot of people going into apprenticeships rather than going to university. So I think some of those communities who really could benefit and should be doing apprenticeships have lost out to others. So I would like to see some changes in the funding model for apprenticeships, which really supports those communities and those individuals who could really benefit from those programs, be that people with disabilities, social inclusion, others as well. So yeah, I think some tweaks to the funding rules around apprenticeships is what I would like to see.
Thanks very much, Emma. We've, as ever, we've run out of time on this issue, and I think it's an issue that does actually need further conversation as well, because there's no question in my mind that if we're not going to achieve net zero, we're not going to achieve the sustainability targets in the world unless we have a more diverse industry and unless we have the skills. Now, the next session we're going to get into some of the detail, but hopefully high level detail around how we actually do that. What kind of skills do we need, for this sector? But if we all recognise that this is an absolutely vital sector, and I think we do in relation to not just our country, but the nation as a whole, there's obviously a lot of events going on in the world that can potentially make it more difficult, more challenging, to actually do that going forward. And maybe we saw some of those overnight across the pond. But these issues do not go away, and I think it's incumbent on every organisation involved in the industry. And I know both of your organisations are very active on this issue as well, in playing a key leadership role in making sure that companies in the sector, do actually not just do the right thing, but actually are seen to do the right thing to promote what's right, in order that we get that more diverse industry that we all want to see going forward. So I'd just like to thank you, Charlotte, and you, Emma, for your thoughts and insights this morning. Really appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed for that. And we're going to reconvene at 10:30 with our second session, which is going to be looking at skills, the type of skills we need in this energy economy that are going to enable us to navigate the transition to net zero. So once again, thank you both, Charlotte and Emma, and we'll see you all again at 10:30. No need to log off, stay on the link, and we'll see you in 10 minutes time. Thanks very much.